This video is sponsored by ExpressVPN. I want to start off by saying I hope you are well, or at least as well as you can be given the current situation. Please stay safe, and if you'd like more information about how to do that, I'll drop a link in the description below. So a while ago, I guess it was around the time of the last presidential election, so literally 4 years ago, Jesus, I made this video called Stop Voting for the Lesser of Two Evils. Now, I fully expected to have a cringe headache when I went back to watch this video, but to be honest, besides the shitty lighting, I mean, this was kind of a tough period for me for a multitude of reasons, but surely I could have found like a desk lamp or something somewhere. But besides that, I still mostly agree with it. The gist of it is that the idea of having to vote for the lesser of two evils in every election is an unsustainable proposition if the goal is actually improving the country. It seems to me that if we remain content in voting for people that we don't actually want to be the president just because they're like slightly less objectionable, then we'll never actually be presented with someone that we actually would like to win. And the only way that I can figure that we get out of this cycle is by supporting candidates that we actually like and voting based on who we actually want to win the election rather than who we think is electable. Now that right there, the word electable, that gives me cringe headaches. However, like most of my videos from like before 2018, that video is less than 5 minutes long, which I've since learned from my fellow video essayists is not nearly enough time to even begin to engage the nuance of any given subject. Oh my God, Natalie, what are you doing to me? So now I guess I'm gonna attempt a 2020 version of that video. Hi, I'm T1J.
Follow me.
This video, like all my videos, would not be possible without my members and patrons, including homies like Sheena Devon, Siren Denied, Septic Skeptic, and Patty J. Simpson. If you'd like to support the channel, you can become a homie yourself by clicking the join button below the video or by checking out my page on Patreon. So while I think local and state elections are very important, the presidential election in America is kind of a joke to me. The current electoral college system greatly subverts democracy and makes it so that not only do some people's votes matter more than others, some people's votes don't really matter much at all, at least with regard to who actually becomes the president. For example, I live in Alabama, and here it is pretty much a foregone conclusion that all 9 of our electoral votes are gonna go to whoever the Republican nominee is, as they have for the past 40 years. So a person like me who is very unlikely to vote for a Republican candidate might find little incentive in getting up and turning off Animal Crossing and going to vote. That said, I think you should probably still go vote in presidential elections, even if you live in a state like mine. For one, I think it's just a good habit to build. Like I said before, I think voting in local elections is super important. Even here in Alabama, we elected Democrat Doug Jones to the Senate. It was an uphill battle in a Republican majority state, but ultimately the voters pulled it off. So never think that voting doesn't do anything. And although presidential elections are kind of wacky because of the Electoral College and the existence of red and blue states, voting in the presidential primary still has a large effect on who ultimately becomes the president. What I'm saying is it's good to be a voter. Just vote because you can, and the more you do it, the more likely you are to continue to do it. And I think the more people we have that are voters, the better. Of course, here in the United States, we could always make voting mandatory, in which case it should obviously also be easy and convenient. And this would essentially make everybody a voter. But of course, some politicians don't want everybody to be a voter, particularly people that are less likely to vote for them. Ironically, the best way to move towards a better voting system is to vote for people that would lead us towards something like that. So meta. And if you do live in a state where the candidate you want to support is a member of a minority party, I still think you should vote, if for no other reason than to let them know that you exist. In 2016, Donald Trump received about 1.3 million votes in Alabama, but Hillary Clinton received about 700,000 votes. That's still a fuck ton of people. And that was like 35% of the vote and like 15% of the total population of the state. It's not enough to win the electoral votes, but it might be enough to get noticed. It might be enough to remind Republican officials that you exist and to consider your positions whenever they make decisions. It might be enough to convince some up-and-coming politicians that they might have a chance against Republicans in the near future. And maybe if we convince people that voting is a good thing to do, maybe that percentage could go even higher. This is of course coming from someone who disagrees with the Republican platform in almost every way. If you like the Republicans, then you can do this hypothetical exercise in like California or something. If you live in a so-called battleground, purple or swing state, then you definitely should vote because your votes kinda matter more than everybody else's. It's sad, but it's true. And despite what some people say, it really does matter who becomes the president. The president has a lot of influence in the direction the country moves in. And in many cases, the president can make drastic changes in certain people's way of life through the signing of just one executive order. The president appoints judges. The president commands the military and can start and end wars. And the president is essentially the public face of the country for the duration of their term. And I know this is another America-centric video, but I'm sure it's very similar for heads of state in democracies across the world. And listen, I'm not that guy that's going to tell you who you should vote for. It is pretty disappointing to me personally that Donald Trump is the president of my country. But if I live in a country that doesn't find a person like Donald Trump objectionable enough to not make him the president, well, I think that's good to know. It helps explain to me a lot of the shit that goes down in this country, and it will inform my decisions about living in this country as I move forward in life. The truth is often disappointing, but I still want to know it. So over the years, some people have scoffed at my displeasure with Donald Trump, especially people that I've been following for a while. Because as you may or may not know, I did not vote for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. I voted for Jill Stein. A lot of people argue that voting for third-party candidates is essentially throwing your vote away, if not actively supporting the worst candidate. Third-party candidates like Jill Stein, Gary Johnson, and Ralph Nader were often accused of stealing votes from Democratic candidates and were sometimes outright blamed for the eventual Republican victories. But I feel like this is fairly condescending and presumptuous. This argument seems to be exclusively used as a scapegoat for Democratic losses, as if every third-party voter had Democrats as their second choice, which is almost certainly not true. It also assumes that third-party voters don't understand the circumstances and implications of their vote, but there's no reason to think that third-party voters are any less informed about their votes than anyone else. I feel like if Democrats don't want people to vote third party, then they should nominate more appealing candidates. It basically comes off as being mad that someone isn't on your team, which is kind of petty, right? It's like being mad that someone doesn't like your favorite band. Go listen to All Time Low on your own time. Leave me alone. Being fair, I think part of it is the idea that it seems like someone could be on your team and you know in your head that your team needs as much help as it can get in order to win, which I guess is kind of disappointing. But again, I feel like this is presumptuous. I in no way thought that Hillary Clinton was as bad as or worse than Donald Trump, but I didn't really find her to be a favorable candidate. I didn't feel like she echoed my positions or overall vision for the direction of the country very much at all. So people who were supporters of Hillary Clinton would be kind of arrogant to just assume that I would be on their team just because I oppose Donald Trump. Now, of course, some people advocate for strategic voting, trying to find a perfect balance between agreeable positions and having an actual chance at winning. This seems to be why the more moderate Democratic candidates seem to always get the nomination over the more progressive ones, because people seem to think that they have a better chance of winning against Republicans. The problem is what makes a candidate electable is people's willingness to vote for them. But if people are unwilling to vote for them because they don't think they're electable, well, that's just a vicious cycle. And I think that's how we keep ending up with this lesser of two evils conversation every 4 years. This is why my position is that you should vote for whoever you like the best out of the available options. In local elections, in primary elections, and in the general election. I don't personally feel comfortable voting for someone just because they have a better shot at winning. It just feeds into that vicious cycle that I keep referring to. Now, you may think that there are 0 good candidates in any given election and that it's some weird version of the trolley problem where you're screwed no matter what you do. The first thing I'd say is to make sure that there are in fact no favorable candidates. Do your research and make sure your opinions haven't been formed or influenced or warped by Facebook or cable news or YouTube. It could be the case that the thing you dislike about any given candidate is misleading or outright false. It happens all the time. In fact, I think there's more misinformation being spread these days about any given candidate than actual information. Fact check that shit. And also keep in mind that you probably aren't ever going to find a candidate that you agree 100% with on everything. If you find a candidate whose positions generally reflect your view of a good direction, you should consider that a win. I get really creeped out when people deify politicians and act like they can do no wrong and their decisions are always perfect. It is okay to be a supporter of someone even if you have some criticisms of them. But assuming you still can't find a candidate you like, then you probably should pick the lesser of the evils in that situation. Might as well, someone's going to win, might as well push toward the least shitty option. But we shouldn't bully or shame people if what someone considers the least shitty option is not a Democrat or a Republican, but Democrats are usually the ones who do it. And really, I think that as long as we keep chasing electability over favorability, then these insipid, if not outright lousy candidates will keep getting churned out. Now, it's worth mentioning the predicament for people who plan to vote Democrat in November of this year. Joe Biden, the presumptive presidential nominee for the Democratic Party, has been accused of sexual assault by Tara Reade, a former staffer. And you can Google that if you want to know all the details. This has caused a lot of stress for voters because for some people, that's a deal breaker, and I don't blame them. The issue here is that unless Biden willingly removes himself from the race, he will almost certainly be the Democratic nominee. And assuming that happens, his main opponent will be Donald Trump, a person who has also been accused of sexual assault multiple times. This to me seems like the ultimate test of the lesser of two evils. Of course, there are other parties and other candidates, and as you've gathered, I fully support people who vote third party if they believe those parties produce the best candidates. But if you're a strategic voter, this is a pretty tough situation, and I don't have the answer. I think it might be similar to the ideas I talked about in my video about separating art from the artist. Now, political office holders definitely affect our lives in a way much different than artists and entertainers do. But ultimately, I think it boils down to an individual choice about what we value the most and what consequences we're prepared to suffer. But election day isn't till November, and a lot could happen in the meantime. So I guess we'll see. That's just me though. What do you think? Thanks for watching, and thanks to ExpressVPN for sponsoring this video. ExpressVPN is a virtual private network service that protects you from people, websites, companies, and even governments trying to access your private data and use it for whatever sketchy purpose they have in mind. It does this by encrypting your data as it goes in and out of your devices, as well as masking your IP address so you can browse the web anonymously. This is especially useful in these weird times we're living in these days, as many of us are spending a lot more time online. And this just gives advertisers, internet service providers, and websites even more opportunities to monitor and collect our private information. ExpressVPN has the fastest speeds, 24/7 customer support, and it's really easy to use. Literally just click a button. As a result, it's been rated the #1 VPN by CNET, The Verge, Wired, TechRadar, and many more. I was a little hesitant about VPNs at first. A lot of these companies make extravagant or misleading claims about what the products actually do. I was also a little concerned because, sure, keeping my data and online activity private from ISPs and websites sounds great, but I also don't want the VPN itself monitoring or collecting my data either. I've read that some VPNs actually sell your data to third parties, but after doing some research, I realized that all VPN providers are not created equal. Not only does ExpressVPN not sell your data, they don't even really have it to begin with. They don't log or monitor any of your personal information, and they've even been audited by a third-party organization to prove this is true. And ExpressVPN is very straightforward about what it does and doesn't do. Every question I had about this service is answered thoroughly either in the FAQ page or on their frequently updated blog. At the end of the day, just like probably most of you, I think it's pretty icky that parties like my ISP and advertisers are going to great lengths to track and monitor my location and online behavior. So I use ExpressVPN simply for an added layer of privacy and anonymity online. If you'd like to try it out, go to expressvpn.com/T1J and find out how you can get 3 free months added on to your subscription. And if you're unsatisfied for any reason, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. I know internet privacy is a big deal to a lot of people, so if you'd like to take a step towards reclaiming your online privacy, check out ExpressVPN by clicking the link in the description below. And remember, by supporting sponsors like ExpressVPN, you not only get access to a great service, but you also support me and help me take my content to the next level.